Hello. From Wonder Media Network, I'm Jenny Kaplan, and this is Womanica. This month, we're talking about women of sound. These women dominated the airwaves, innovating, documenting, and creating the audio landscape we live in today. Today, we're talking about an icon of Brazilian pop music. As a fixture of the tropicalia movement in the late 1960s, her singular voice reflected the social unrest of Brazilian youth during a military dictatorship. Please welcome Gal Costa. Gal was born Maria de Graça Costa Pena Burgos on September 26, 1945, in Bahia, Brazil. Even in her earliest days, she was determined to have a career on stage. She said, "I was born wanting to sing, wanting to be a singer. I always thought I would be one. I had this intuition and I wanted it." During Gal's childhood, the energetic samba music that had dominated Brazilian culture gave way to cool romantic bossa nova. The genre became incredibly popular, not just in Brazil, but internationally too. In 1967, Gal, who was now in her early 20s, released her first album, Domingo. It was a duet project with fellow Brazilian composer and singer Caetano Veloso. Their songs reflected the bossa nova style that dominated the country's pop charts. But Brazil was going through an upheaval in pop music and in politics. In 1964, a few years before Gal's first record, a military coup had overthrown the country's democratic government. The Brazilian people found themselves under a harsh military dictatorship, backed by the U.S. And as the years passed, Brazil's young musicians, like Gal, started experimenting with ways to push back against the authoritarian regime. That's where tropicalia came in. A new avant-garde movement in Brazilian culture. It was inherently political, partly inspired by the leftist youth movement exploding in France. Tropicalia combined familiar elements of samba and bossa nova with the psychedelic rock that was blowing up in Britain. Gal became one of the biggest names in the burgeoning genre, along with previous collaborator Caetano Veloso and big acts like Gilberto Gil, Maria Bethânia, and Tom Zé. In 1968, Gal was featured on the collaborative album Tropicalia, O Panis et Circenses, Bread and Circuses. The project was a joining of the leading creative minds of the artistic movement and produced Gal's first big hit single in Brazil, Baby. But despite the new genre's popularity, tropicalia faced strong opposition from Brazil's authoritarian government. Political leaders were threatened by the movement's rejection of conservative culture and its leftist political overtones. In 1968, the same year as Gal's first hit, the government arrested her friends and collaborators, Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil. They were released from jail only on the condition that they go into exile. Other musicians followed and continued to write and release music from their new homes in Europe. For the next 3 years, Gal visited her friends in London, but she remained living and working in Brazil. She would take songs that Veloso and Gil wrote and then release and perform them in their home country, though her music had to be approved by government censors. It was certainly risky to remain connected with her exiled collaborators, but Gal later said, "It was not a matter of courage. I belonged to that movement and they were my friends." Gal released her debut self-titled solo album in 1969. The project revealed her continued evolution as a vocalist, combining her familiar soft whisper with sharper, more daring vocals. She released a second solo album, Legal, the following year. By 1971, the exiled members of the tropicalia movement were allowed to return to Brazil. Gal continued to release music and made waves in 1973 when she released her album, India. The album cover, which focused on Gal's red bikini bottoms, was considered so scandalous that it was censored. Eventually, tropicalia phased out of the pop charts in Brazil. For a while, Gal's music featured the synth-heavy pop tracks that became popular in the late 1970s and 80s. But eventually, she returned to her tropicalia roots. In her decades-long career, Gal toured internationally. Her first performance in the United States was 2 sold-out shows at Carnegie Hall in 1985. She remained a beloved fixture of Brazilian pop music throughout her life and received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Latin Grammys in 2011. Gal died on November 9, 2022. She was 77 years old. All month, we're talking about women of sound. For more information, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Womanica Podcast. Special thanks to Liz Kaplan, my favorite sister and co-creator. Talk to you tomorrow.